about the unchecked forms of id, but the harshness from the superego. So early in life, you're getting this programming, stuff like you're a good boy, you're a good girl, don't be bad, don't be this, don't be that. And the people around you kind of have to say these things because otherwise you'll be wild. But along the way, it develops a superego, which is basically an inner critic that tells you, now you're not worthy, now you're not right, now you're not good. And so we tend to have this inner critical side. This is the same thing that says you can't go and talk to that person that never talked to you. You can't make that friendship. You can't have that love relationship. You can't get that job. You can't follow that dream. That's the inner critic, but it's actually kind of well-intentioned. It was early in life you were programmed to fit in. Hi, today we have Sigmund Freud's Life Lessons Men Should Learn as Soon as Possible. It's actually an article in his financial magazine called newtraderoo.com, Empowering Your Financial Journey, and it seems to be directed at men, and it is basically an article about men. If you're a lady or a person who doesn't think you're a lady or a man or whatever you are, they, them, whatever it is, you can still read it, still watch it, and it's very interesting. A little bit more focused. It's basically what we're going to go through in this video applies to everybody. Slightly more nuanced towards men, but still relevant to everybody. So let's get going with it. Today we're going to take a quick look at this nice article called Sigmund Freud, Life Lessons Men Should Learn as Soon as Possible. So I can't ignore an article on Sigmund Freud. I don't know if it's good or bad, I haven't read it yet. It's a little reaction video. I basically, if you haven't watched my stuff, I like Sigmund Freud. I think a lot of people just have generic ideas about him. He's not perfect. He's writing from, or conceptualizing over 100 years ago. We have to build upon Freud. But a lot of the basics of psychodynamics are based upon Freudian thought, the unconscious mind and unconscious motivations and so on. So let's just take a look through the article and see how you get on. Okay. Yeah. Okay, it says here, Sigmund Freud, the father of psychoanalysis, offered profound insights over his storied career that remains deeply relevant for men seeking to actualize their potential and live more enriching lives by today's standards. Freud reveals symbolic meanings, hidden behaviors, and elevated self-understanding to new heights. It's true. Okay, Victorian era guy, learning Freud's life lessons helps us go beyond destructive impulse. Blah, 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 blah. Very good. This is newtraderoo.com, by the way. Okay, so this is just a general intro. Okay, let's go and move on to something more interesting. Okay, maybe this is written by ChatGPT. Who knows? Let's take a look. It's more interesting. Let's take a look. Understanding your ego, superego. This is very important. So Freud's psychoanalytic theory outlines three critical components of psyche, which is the id, the ego, and superego. And that's actually called the first typology, and we change it slightly later on. But this basic first typology, which is the simpler one, he talked later about a thing called the ego idea. But let's just take a look at this one here to react. The id is basically the primordial energies, usually very destructive impulses deep within the mind. The ego is yourself, and the superego is basically your inner critic. Don't do that, don't do this, so on and so forth, okay? So let's say, look here. So for example, he says, understanding an outburst of anger as the id overriding ego and superego helps frame it as a temporary loss of control rather than defining a personality flaw. So this is a good point. So basically, if you look at Freud, what Freud is basically saying is that civilization is a balancing act whereby we have to take this primordial self, kind of the id, this caveman who wants to bash people's brains and rape people and dominate people and basically hedonistic. We have to put him in his box. But we do need him. We do need the drive to achieve things. It's important, but we need to put them in a way. And how we deal with that in civilization, and Freud deals with this in various forms. He talks about a very famous work called Civilization and Its Discontents, and he talks about how society worked over a period of time to go beyond tribalism, is that we learn to repress. And repression is great. We learn to fit in, but it also makes life bland. The reason why we're bored and we're frustrated is we're bored because we're repressed, and we're frustrated because we're not able to fulfill our desires. But of course, the desires are often involve things like violence and sex, and they cause a problem within society, the appropriate use of violence and sex. So let's take a look at this. Manage your anxiety at your self-awareness. Freud associated many forms of anxiety with the ego struggles to balance the unchecked desires of the unconscious id with the harsh judgment of superego. And this is a very good point, actually. You're making a good point here. About the unchecked forms of id with the harsh judgment of superego. So early in life, you're getting this programming, stuff like you're a good boy, you're a good girl, don't be bad, don't be this, don't be that. And the people around you kind of have to say these things because otherwise you'll be wild. But along the way, it develops a superego, which is basically an inner critic that tells you, now you're not worthy, now you're not right, now you're not good. And so we tend to have this inner critical side. This is the same thing that says you can't go and talk to that person that never talked to you. You can't make that friendship. You can't have that love relationship. You can't get that job. You can't follow that dream. That's the inner critic, but it's actually kind of well-intentioned. It was early in life you were programmed to fit in. So you got this drive, and you got this conflict between this drive and this inner party of this superego or critic holding you back. Let's go back to the article. Repressing emotions creates inner turmoil, manifesting as anxiety. When feelings of pain, rage, or sexuality reach conscious awareness against the ego's wishes. So this is another good point. He's hitting two nails with two hammers here. Basically, that our unconscious mind, or we call subconscious mind, Freud called unconscious mind, same thing. That which is hidden from the daily ego, it keeps trying to come out there. And so it's continually creating a kind of inner conflict because it's trying to, let's say for example, you really would like to get to know somebody romantically, but you can't for whatever reason. But the desire still is there. It wants to meet that person. It wants to reach out to that person. And so we end up with anxiety because we want to do one thing, but we know for whatever reason we can't. Maybe we judged it as not practical. Maybe the person has blown us off or gaslit us or whatever it is. So mastering concern requires knowing ourselves deeply enough through analysis and reflection to bring harmony between all elements of psyche. So yeah, Freud was the creator of psychoanalysis, where you lie on the couch and you talk about your mother, that sort of thing, that kind of trope in movies. But yeah, talking about with the analyst. And of course today you could do it through self-help books and courses and so on. Getting to know yourself and understanding what your issues are. Men learning to acknowledge but not suppress emotions and confronting buried pain can significantly reduce stress and overwhelm. And then it says practical self-care tactics include journaling, meditation, focus on profound reflection, and ask your trusted friend or therapist to lend an ear or honest conversation about vulnerability. And this is a very important point here, actually. I think this is a pretty good article so far. If you go by Freudian theory, Freud has this idea of what's called the Oedipus complex. Okay? So, the Oedipus complex is basically saying that the boy wants to have sex with the mother, the father gets in the way, and so he learns to be heterosexual and find his own partner. And then there's also an electric concept for the lady, that she's attracted to her dad, the mother's in the way, and she finds a way, okay? And that's very simplistically put. I don't think many people would directly buy into that today. That was a theory as put by Freud. I think we can take more symbolic aspects of that and think more of a symbolic, like Jacques Lacan, the famous French psychoanalyst, would talk about this, what's called the symbolic order, and that. So this basically, we have a self-indulgent side, and it wants to just follow the lowest common denominator, the easiest thing, and somewhere along the way we get frustrated, and the frustration creates a sense of reality. Melanie Klein, in her object relations theory, would also touch upon that. So whatever it is, a certain amount of frustration is required, and this irritation or frustration pulls us out of ourselves towards moving on to something better. But if you go back to that basic theory of, and I think it's an interesting point, and maybe Freud doesn't fully answer, but it's something worth exploring. He says that in the case of the boy, he has a fear of castration. So he's basically saying that the girl is already castrated. Now, again, you don't have to buy into this or believe it. It's a suggestion, and maybe there's an interesting point in it. He says the girl has to accept that she's castrated. So it's like the female genitalia. Looks as if there was a penis that was chopped off. But the boy is fearing that. And because he's fearing that and it doesn't happen, and also that his early life attachment tends to be towards the mom, and that's cut off. They can't have his mom. Whereas the girl can still have her mom, because she's just not having a dad, but usually the closest bonding to the mom is that the Oedipus complex is more harshly navigated in the case of the boy. And as a result of that, men tend to have a far more, let's say, rough Oedipus complex, which results in men being far more, let's say, there's an aggressive part to the sexual drive, both in men and women, but more so in men. A lot of men have an issue with a desire for aggressivity with sexuality. So, for example, rape fantasies and all that. And of course, a lot of ladies have rape fantasies, and the opposite way, that they want men to rape them, not in reality, but in the sense of they have some fantasies. But a lot of men have difficulty with the aggressivity. So that's Freud's opinion. You could take a more biological aspect and say women have a lot of testosterone. Testosterone makes you more aggressive. But there is interesting correlations when you start thinking to yourself that a lot of men have issues with sexuality and aggressivity. And it is there. I mean, if you look at the different types of pornography that's out there, you look at how many people get raped and so on, aggressivity and sexuality is an issue for a lot of people, more so for men than women. And so men have this desire for love. But there's often a lot of aggression while having a desire for love. And yet men tend to be, in society, less able to or less accepted expressing how they feel. So you have a situation where men have more sort of angst than women in general, but it's socially acceptable for them to talk about it. Because first of all, if a man talks about, say, aggressivity and sexuality, people think he's some kind of rapist or sex abuser or something. And secondly, it's just more difficult for men to talk about intimacy. So what I think the main gist of this article, where to talk about what men can learn from psychoanalysis, is it's okay to have issues. It's okay to maybe, for example, with sexuality, to have certain drives or fantasies which are maybe a little bit aggressive and you're not so happy about. It's also okay to accept that maybe you have a lot of feelings of love towards somebody, but you don't know how to express it, because as a man, we tend not to be so good at expressing. So women also need to work on this, but in general, women would have less aggressivity issues, and women tend to be better at talking about things. So I think that's the general gist. What he's suggesting, the same thing I would suggest. He says here, practical care tactics include journaling, meditation, profound reflection, and either getting some therapy or asking somebody to help you. That's very good. So growth requires facing pain and discomfort. According to Freud, embracing suffering is necessary for personal development, as humans naturally seek comfort and complacency without external pressure. And this can be difficult. He says here that men mainly can overrely on physical gratification over pursuing purpose. So, again, it's too much into porn and stuff like that, of course. Because men are highly visual, they tend to be more so into it than women. Chasing superficial pleasures or distractions. Again, I think talking about masturbation and stuff like that. Prioritizing effort and achievement over passive comfort helps men gain the strength to endure inevitable troubles, maximize their potential, and experience fulfillment. So things are obviously like, for example, endless one-night stands, too much masturbation, too much porn, too much drinking alcohol, too much taking drugs, maybe too much driving your bike or your car too aggressively, too much maybe jumping off of skydiving or something, not because you like skydiving, but you just want to do risky things. Negative behaviors, and I'm not knocking if somebody wants to do skydiving. I'm just saying that men tend to act out when they're not able to fulfill themselves emotionally. Healthy relations require emotional maturity. Freud's work emphasizes understanding unconscious drives and development stages to create psychological healthy interpersonal relationships. He stressed mastering sexual impulses, recognizing narcissistic tendencies, properly elevating care for others in adulthood as keys to finding compatibility, for instance. In other words, you got to grow up if you want to get married. Okay? Freud would argue men who haven't separated appropriately from their mothers in youth struggle to build intimacy as adults. Okay, so and again with the Freudian Oedipus thing, if the mom's too much in your life as a young child, you might be either more prone to being gay, this would be the traditional idea, or struggle to, what's the word for it? Struggle to get out of the house and get your own life. Okay, so particularly if the father is either not present or the father is a weak father who's not in your life. Progress requires, so this is very much geared towards men. Progress requires men to reject avoidance behaviors like defensiveness, dishonesty, or aggression, and instead cultivate active listening, compromise, and supporting a partner during difficult admissions, identifying relationship fears rooted in past trauma through analysis, and then countering regression also bolsters lasting satisfaction. So, that men have a tendency of going back into negative behaviors, like going it alone, not talking to anybody, sulking, being aggressive, being non-communicative. I mean, a big thing, I would say from experience over the years, noticed a lot of ladies who would have problems with men would tend to say things like, I don't know who you are, you're not connecting, you're not communicating. And women, to feel good in relationships, need to feel that the man is there for them. Developing insight into your past motivations. Most of his work is about upbringing, past encounters, subtle interactions. Okay, so careful analysis of dreams and management. Basically, do some journaling. Basically, while I say learning about your life story is very, very important. And then, of course, striving for meaning and balance, retain the spirit of lifelong learning. Okay. So this is actually very good. I think it's well worth your while reading it. I don't want to do the full article because I don't like going too long in these videos. They take too long, nobody watches them then. And he goes into a lot more detail here. You don't have to do psychoanalysis to develop and grow and all that stuff. It's not necessary. But I actually quite like this article, and this is New Trader You Empowering Your Financial Journey. It's actually financial, but there you go. But I think it's good that, don't just feel that the women have something over you and you can't find a way forward. You're a human being first. And yes, you might have some rather aggressive instincts which are hard to deal with. And yes, you might have difficulty communicating compared to ladies who tend to seem to be better at it. But you're a human being, and we can learn from people like Sigmund Freud to reflect. And so my advice to you will be, do self-help programs, self-help books, self-help courses, bit of therapy or counseling now and again is good. Basically reflect and work on, there's lots of videos in this channel and many other channels about nurturing yourself. So as men, I would say to all men out here, nurture yourself, accept yourself as you are, and work on becoming the better version of yourself. And Sigmund Freud is a good stopping point for that. I endorse this article. It's very unusual in a financial magazine, but it's actually pretty good. And you can read it in full. There's a lot more to it there. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. And I'll talk to you next time.